Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first live session of AgScape's virtual annual general meeting 2022. I'm Catherine Doan, AgScape's Board of Directors chairperson, and I'm very excited to be coming today to celebrate AgScape's virtual AGM. We know it's a busy time of year, so we all appreciate you taking the time to join us. We hope that you are all very safe and healthy and are excited to have you join us for this virtual event, and welcome everyone to join us for our next virtual event on May 11th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and our in-person event, which is at May 13th at the University of Guelph Arboretum from 2 to 4 p.m. So that is May 13th at the University of Guelph Arboretum. We'd love to see you in person. These experiences will both be fantastic, and we will be able to connect and learn about our collective impacts in providing agriculture and food education to Ontario students and teachers. If you need more information on these events, feel free to scan the QR code that is on the screen in front of you today. This year's theme is making authentic connections across Ontario. So through leading interactive agriculture and food education in Ontario, AgScape has embraced the importance of our partners and supporters in helping to ensure the importance that every student in Ontario has an agriculture and food education experience. We'd like to take a moment to give special thanks to P&H Milling Group, our broadcast sponsors, for bringing you the live portion of our virtual annual general meeting, including this event today. We're very grateful to have an incredible lineup with us today, including a keynote presenter, Mike Dorrington from Ontario Genomics, and as well a panel of education professionals that will be sharing their stories on how they have been connected to Ontario students with agriculture and food education. We're really excited for today's session, and I wanted to give a big thanks to the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, or OFA, for sponsoring today's panel, which is a discussion for all of us helping connect on the important topic of dynamic approaches in fostering agriculture and food literate citizens. Next up, we'll share with you the agenda. It is here on the screen. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to use our chat function, or obviously reach out on an individual basis to one of our team members that is supporting the event today. They're happy to help you. Some housekeeping items to make sure that we have the best virtual experience as possible. It looks like everyone is well versed in respect to having their microphones off and making sure that they're able to use that chat box. Thank you for those that have welcomed each of you and shared where you are coming and joining us today. We appreciate that. If you have questions and answers during the keynote session or the panel, please type that in. We ask for you to include your name so that we can directly address you. If there's additional information that you need, please reach out to info@agscape.ca. And most importantly, we want our voice to be heard when it comes to agriculture and food education and the wonderful things that are being shared today at the AGM. So please join the conversation on social media by using the hashtag AgScape AGM22. So I'm sure that will also be included in the chat if you need clarification there, but please join us on social media by sharing today. We really appreciate that support. Now we're almost ready to get started, but before I introduce our next person, we'd just like to thank our members and our AGM sponsors. Your impact means so much. It really does continue to drive our ability to have the impact, especially during the last 2 years, which we all know that we've faced different challenges, but we're really happy to report that because of your support in 2021, we were able to reach over 4,500 teachers with our programs and resources and provide over 825,000 student engagements. So high five to that. Congratulations all around. Thank you to the supporters of AgScape as well as the AgScape team.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Catherine, for the wonderful kickoff to our annual general meeting. And if you don't know who I am Mercedes Unwin, Program Resource Manager at AgScape. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Mike Dorrington. And after he delivers his presentation, we will have a Q&A. So I encourage you to post any questions you have in the chat as they come up. So with that, just a little bit of a brief bio about Mike. Dr. Mike Dorrington is an advisor at Ontario Genomics, a not-for-profit organization that leads the application of genomic-based solutions across key sectors of the economy to drive economic growth, improve quality of life, and global leadership for Ontario, as well as works closely with the agriculture and food industry. Mike works with researchers, companies, and other partners, including AgScape and maybe many of you on this call, across health, industrial biotechnology, and of course, again, agriculture and food throughout Ontario and beyond to bring innovative genomic-based solutions to the world's most pressing opportunities and issues. So, ladies and gentlemen, help me by welcoming Mike from Ontario Genomics, and then I'll kind of spin it over to him to get started.
Awesome. Let me just get my presentation up here. Okay. So good morning, everybody. I want to thank Mercedes for that wonderful introduction, and especially to Taylor and Mercedes for the invitation to speak with you all today. And I want to thank all of you for your continued support of AgScape, an organization that's doing vital work in ensuring that students have access to one-of-a-kind resources and helping develop the next generation of leaders in the ag and food sector here in Canada. I've been lucky to see firsthand the passion and commitment everyone at AgScape brings to building and supporting these resources. And personally, I wish they had been part of my educational journey while I was growing up here in the Niagara region. I've titled my talk today, The Collaborative Future. I'm going to talk about how the opportunities that we face today are too complex to be tackled by one group of people, by one discipline of science, or in fact, by the entirety of science as we may understand it. The issues facing society today are not only complex, but also intimately interconnected. We hear every day about climate change, finite natural resources, supply chain issues, inflation, and the global waste crisis. Even the thought of rising to these challenges can be daunting. And the fact of the matter is that no one person or even group of people holds all of the solutions to these challenges. This is why it's vital for us to be constantly looking for new ways of thinking, throwing out old assumptions that no longer fit what we see in the world, and perhaps most importantly, listening to those around us. It's also why teaching our children critical thinking, communication, teamwork, and problem solving will do more for them and for our future than merely memorizing facts. Ontario Genomics collaboration and team building are core principles in not only how we work internally as an organization, but also how we create impact in our communities. I'll talk about how we think about collaboration and its role in the future of ag and food, as well as how we've worked with AgScape to support this role. But before I do that, I want to explain a little bit about who we are at Ontario Genomics and about how I personally came to be speaking with you today. So first, genomics is right in our name, so I'd better explain what it is. At its core, genomics is simply the study of life as viewed through the lens of the genomes that form the basis of that life. Every living thing, from the smallest bacteria to the largest tree, has a genome, a set of instructions made up of a 4-letter code strung together on strands of DNA that allows the cells of an organism's body to perform their day-to-day duties in keeping that organism alive. These genomes have evolved over the course of billions of years to allow life to survive and thrive on our planet. Strings of nucleic acid have expanded and contracted, been spliced, copied, and deleted over and over and over again to create the vast array of living things that we see today. And the history of those genomes informs what they are capable of in the future. Genomicists analyze genomes in their entirety, as opposed to gene by gene. For example, maybe the entire genome of a cow, or of a particular insect that lives on that cow. They do this to understand fundamental questions about life. How has it evolved? How did the differences and similarities between genomes lead to the differences and similarities between individuals? What about between species? How can we use this information to do things like improve our health, to improve the yield or disease resistance of a crop, or to breed higher welfare livestock? How can we use the vast complexity of the world's genomes to become better stewards of our planet? How can we use the information that we read in a genome to edit or write completely new genomes? And not only can we do this, but in what context should we do it? These are complex and sometimes intense questions, but we have now reached a point scientifically where we are capable of answering many of them, which is where we come in. Ontario Genomics is part of the Canadian Genomics enterprise, which is made up of our national parent organization, Genome Canada, and 6 regional genomics centers, including Genome BC, Genome Alberta, Genome Prairie, Ontario Genomics, Genome Quebec, and Genome Atlantic. These 7 nonprofit organizations work together to ensure that Canada maintains a world-class genomics ecosystem through research, innovation, and by managing various types of stakeholders, including multiple levels of government, research institutions, companies, schools, and the public at large. We serve these stakeholders through many mechanisms, including the funding of research projects, the building of large-scale coalitions, such as the Canadian COVID Genomics Network, by acting as expert consultants to federal and provincial governments, as well as supporting industry, especially through investments in small to medium enterprises and startup companies. We also provide services to improve genomics-related education and outreach initiatives across the country. For example, by partnering with educational organizations like AgScape on lesson plans and informational videos related to genomics. Finally, we do all while always maintaining a view of how our work impacts our broader society. And we do this by always thinking about what we call GELS, which stands for genomics and its ethical, environmental, economic, legal, and social aspects, which I'll come back to later on in my talk today. The members of the Canadian Genomics enterprise are involved in the application of genomics to any industry or sector that has anything to do with living organisms, including health, agriculture and food, the environment, natural resources, and energy. Now, we do all of these things at Ontario Genomics, but with a particular focus on our province of Ontario. We help Ontario researchers and companies get funding for transformative, genomics-based or genomics-enabled projects. We work with the provincial government to build world-class research and innovation consortia and build lasting education and outreach programs across the province, all in the name of supporting our vision of healthy people, a healthy economy, and a healthy planet through genomics innovations. Our end goal is to provide leadership across sectors that are important to Ontario and Ontarians, especially health, agriculture and food, natural resources, and manufacturing. We do this primarily through the development of public-private partnerships, that is, partnerships between academic and industry leaders, using the talents and resources of each to solve some of society's most pressing challenges. Over the past 20 plus years, our work has supported the injection of over $2.5 billion into Ontario's genomics ecosystem through the funding of over 230 research projects involving well over 500 partnerships. This has led to the creation of over 20,000 jobs and supported Ontario's economy to the tune of over $1.8 billion in GDP growth, all numbers that we're very proud of. It's the partnerships that I'm going to talk about today. Partnerships among countless academic researchers and organizations across the province that have allowed us to have this impact. Now, on my title slide, I alluded to the fact that I am not a genomicist by training. I am also not part of the ag and food industry, nor do I have a teaching degree. In fact, I am an immunologist. I worked in laboratories for 10 years studying our immune system, how it interacts with potentially pathogenic bacteria. Before that, I was an undergrad who had no idea what he wanted to do with his life. And before that, I wanted to be an orthodontist. And yet, here I am talking to you about genomics and agriculture. And I think I can pinpoint the most important decision I made to get here, despite having no idea at the time. Now, when I was in 12th grade, I took biology, chemistry, physics, geometry, calculus, and English. I knew I loved science, or at least that I was good at it. My parents were both scientists. I had great science teachers, and I excelled in these classes. However, I didn't want to pick just one scientific discipline to study, so I found the only program in Canada at the time that would allow me to do them all at once, a program called Science 1 at the University of British Columbia. Now, Science 1 is a first-year course wherein you only have one class all year, with 8 different professors teaching about the interfaces among the sciences. We learned about mathematical modeling of biological systems, how the laws of physics work to bring about complex chemical structures, and how all of these scientific disciplines, previously taught in discrete bundles, supported the establishment and growth of life on our planet. This was my introduction to the idea of transdisciplinary thinking. And after that, I wasn't going to be happy focusing on one thing alone. Now, I'm going to share the broad outline of my course load at UBC while I was an undergrad. I was what's called a general life science major, which meant I took quite a few biology courses, and I focused on immunology, virology, and microbiology simply because I thought they were cool. These courses gave me the basic foundation I would need in order to build knowledge once I got to my postgraduate years at McMaster University. I had the opportunity to truly focus in these areas, but as I mentioned, I was in school to learn more deeply about my wide range of interests, so I stayed in the general program. This allowed me to continue to build my own curriculum. I took advanced classes in English and political science, honing my skills as a writer and debater. Meteorology and math allowed me to work on my analytical skills, while archaeology, philosophy, and history tethered me to the past, and, besides just being interesting, opened me up to new ways of thinking about the world around me. Finally, biomechanics and anatomy forced me to see the connections between the microscopic world of genes, proteins, and cells, and the macroscopic structures of the body, like bones, muscles, and whole body systems. But perhaps most importantly, I was learning from a unique set of teachers, all experts in their given fields, allowing me to draw knowledge from all of them, as well as interacting with other students who are on all sorts of different life and career paths. Now, this all helped me when I got to graduate school at McMaster. In basic immunology courses, like many introductory courses, you're taught a number of rules. For example, some parts of your immune system have the ability for memory, while others do not. Your body responds differently to viruses than it does to bacteria or parasites. And that the immune system can always determine a foreign invader from self. Now, these are helpful rules when you're first learning, but just like in language, I before E except after C and whatnot, there are always exceptions to these rules. So I built my entire research program on these exceptions. In grad school, I studied how proteins, important for carrying modified fat molecules in the blood, are vital for recognizing bacteria living in the nose. I also worked with graduate students in the engineering department to study how these same proteins interacted with novel drug-carrying gels. In my postdoc, I studied how antiviral responses are actually invaluable for fighting off certain bacterial infections, while also working with many colleagues at the National Institutes of Health to determine how the immune cells of the liver work together with the cells of the arteries there to rearrange themselves to best catch foreign invaders. All of these projects went against the orthodoxy of immunology and wouldn't have been possible if not for many minds from many backgrounds deciding to think about things differently. Also key was the support of established researchers who were willing to support our vision despite the risks. Now, I've gone on far too long about myself here, but I hope you see the pattern that's emerging. 2 years ago, I had never applied my own learning or thinking to the idea of how genomics can be used to build a better food system. But everything I've learned to this point prepared me to think about this critically and allowed me to work with my colleagues at Ontario Genomics and all kinds of stakeholders across the province to support the research going on here. Now imagine I'd gone with my first idea of being an orthodontist. Sure, I'd make a lot of money, but I don't think I would have been as satisfied looking into mouths all day. So back to the task at hand. The ag and food sector is facing a number of interconnected challenges right now, but the majority of them boil down to one need: the need to provide the world and the approximately 11 billion people who will live on it by the year 2100 with quality and quantity nutrition, textiles, and even medicines using less land, fewer natural resources like fresh water, and despite a rapidly deteriorating climate. That sounds easy, right? Well, the good news is that we've entered what's known as the fourth agricultural revolution, wherein science and technology will play an outsized role in how we feed the world. And a key piece of this is genomics. Now, genomics is currently applied in the ag and food sector in many different ways, and I'm going to give you a few examples here. The simplest way in which genomics plays a role in ag and food production is through genome-assisted selective breeding of crops and livestock. Humans have been selectively breeding crops and livestock for over 10,000 years, with one great example being the wild mustard plant Brassica oleracea. Just through successive selection of plants with differing traits, ancient farmers were able to create kale, turnips, cabbage, kohlrabi, broccoli, and cauliflower, not to mention collard greens, Chinese broccoli, mustard greens, and Brussels sprouts, all from one plant. For example, here we go. Don't scroll, Mike. For example, plants with overdeveloped roots were selected generation after generation until they became the turnips that we eat today. Selecting for thicker stems led to the cultivation of kohlrabi. The introduction of selective breeding by ancient farmers changed how we were able to feed the planet. However, the process of selective breeding to create a new crop varietal is slow, and you're certainly not guaranteed to get the result you're looking for when you only use physical characteristics for selection. By sequencing the DNA of a crop and correlating its gene sequence or genotype to its physical characteristics or phenotype, we can be more selective for which individuals we breed together. For example, if we find that a particular genotype confers resistance to drought and another confers resistance to disease, we can breed these individuals together to create offspring that carry both genetic traits. To make this even more efficient, we can utilize genetic engineering, wherein the genetic sequence of the crop is specifically altered so that it carries these beneficial genes. Now, one of the ways that this gene editing is done is through a system known as clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats, or CRISPR. Many of you may have heard of CRISPR before, as it's been in the news for various reasons over the past 5 years, including its discovery by Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier, garnering the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2020. CRISPR is often described as a pair of molecular scissors, or tweezers, allowing us to edit the DNA of any organism with relative ease. The applications of this to a wide array of fields, such as health and agriculture, are obvious now. We can remove or alter DNA sequences that are harmful and replace them with sequences that are beneficial. However, these applications weren't so obvious when CRISPR was first discovered. In fact, the reason for CRISPR's original existence was as a type of adaptive immune system for bacteria. When certain types of bacteria are infected by a virus, they will use the CRISPR system to copy part of the viral genome into its own genome, creating a type of genetic snapshot of the infection in case that bacteria is infected by the same virus again. If it is, the bacteria will be ready and able to destroy the genetic material of the virus much more efficiently, much like how our own immune system works after a vaccine. When this was discovered in the 1990s, the potential applications weren't exactly clear. In fact, it wasn't until about 20 years later we began to use CRISPR as a gene editing tool, and only after molecular biologists around the world had figured out the fine details of how CRISPR functions. This is an excellent example of how someone can look at an ancient biological system in a new way and, almost overnight, completely change how we interact with the natural world, just like those ancient farmers discovering how to use selective breeding way back when. Now, CRISPR isn't just the purview of molecular biologists. Medical scientists, microbiologists, crop scientists, tissue engineers, and many others are all applying CRISPR to their work in different ways. And the data produced through genomics is guiding how CRISPR is applied in all of these cases. Another example of this is the microbiome. Now, we're all familiar these days with our own microbiome, the collection of bacteria, viruses, and fungi that live on and inside our bodies. Without it, we'd be unable to efficiently digest our food or fight off potential pathogens. Our microbiome affects our mood, we smell, and the pH of our skin. It stimulates mucus production and gives us acne and cavities. But it's not just animals that have a microbiome. In fact, you'd be hard-pressed to find any natural environment or organism that didn't have one, and that includes the plants that we grow. Much like animals, plants rely on viruses, bacteria, and fungi to get all of the nutrients they need while fending off disease. These microorganisms can live on the stems and leaves of plants, but are predominantly found in the soil. Some ways that these soil microbes can help crop growth are through nutrient capture and solubilization, competition with potential pathogens for nutrients in space, the production of growth-promoting hormones, and many more. We've now gained a strong understanding of how microbes promote plant growth and specifically which genes need to be present in the soil microbiome to do so. Understanding this, we can now engineer the microbiome of plants to provide certain needs through the addition of what we call bioinoculants, which really just means living organisms that are used as additives to the soil or to the plants themselves. For example, some bacteria make plants more robust in the face of drought conditions. By adding these microbes to a farmer's field, crops will be less likely to succumb to a lack of water. This has the dual benefit of creating healthier plants that are more likely to make it to market, while also reducing the amount of water the farmer has to use to keep the crop healthy. That's a win for the farmer and for the environment. So this is a great time to bring back the concept of transdisciplinary thinking. Both of the examples I've just given for how genomics is used in agriculture are examples of applying research predominantly performed in the name of human health to the field of crop science. Molecular tools for editing genomes, like CRISPR, can be used to create crops more resistant to drought or infection. Taking what we know about the mammalian microbiome and applying it to the soil allows us to do the same thing. Transdisciplinary thinking allows us to apply multiple disciplines to a novel, complex problem. In the case of climate change and how it affects crops, we need to bring together tools from various disciplines. Climate science and meteorology tell us what to expect in the future, and therefore what traits our crops are likely to need in order to survive. Crop science and genomics give us information on what starting material is available to us in the form of the genotypes and phenotypes that exist in current crops. And finally, microbiology and molecular biology give us the tools with which to alter our current crops to better withstand the changes we are likely to see over the next decades. Every piece of this is necessary to adapt our food system to climate change, and it will take members of each of these fields working together to arrive at the best solutions. Another great example of this is a whole new way of producing food and other products, and that's cellular agriculture. The term cellular agriculture encapsulates two distinct technology platforms: precision fermentation and tissue cultivation, both of which are underpinned by a relatively new scientific discipline known as engineering biology. At its core, engineering biology is the application of engineering principles to building biological systems from scratch. In precision fermentation, bacterial or yeast cells are essentially converted into miniature biological factories and used to produce a desired product in brewery-style tanks. This could be a more complete product, such as egg white protein or honey, or simpler ingredients like flavorings and pigments. In tissue cultivation, cells from animals are grown outside of the body to produce cultivated meat or seafood products, essentially creating meat without the animal. So these are just some of the examples of products that are in development, and in some cases on the market around the world, that can be produced through fermentation or cultivation. Rennet, used in cheese making, is perhaps the earliest example of cellular agriculture in action, having been produced through fermentation since the 1990s. Complex dairy proteins in products such as ice cream and cream cheese have started reaching the market, while heme protein is used in the Impossible Burger to give it its characteristic bloody taste and texture. Recently, more fulsome plant-based products such as chocolate and coffee have come to market as well. In fact, many of these products are already quite common. Impossible Burger is widely available in Canada, including at Burger King, and you might have heard of the company Perfect Day, who make ice cream and cream cheese so far. Now, cultivated meats are a bit further behind, catching up quickly. Hybrid chicken bites made of cultivated chicken and plant-based ingredients are now available in Singapore, while many companies are working on other products such as beef, fish, and foie gras. If done right, these products should be indistinguishable from traditionally produced foods. Now, I want to highlight that cellular agriculture is meant to supplement more traditional agriculture, not replace it entirely. To feed 11 billion people will take all of the tools we have, along with others that we've yet to invent. Now, as I mentioned, cellular agriculture is an excellent example of what is possible with transdisciplinary thinking and cross-sector cooperation. Not only are multiple scientific disciplines necessary here, the existing ag and food industry and more traditional engineering are also key to creating these products at scale and for the market. Here I've listed only a small selection of the types of people needed to make these products a reality and allow them to reach their full potential, including various types of engineers, members of the traditional ag and food sector, and various experts in biological systems, including medical researchers who have the most experience with culturing cells outside the body. Underpinning all of this is genomics. You can't build something that you don't intimately understand. And so engineering organisms means understanding how the structure of their genomes affects their ability to, for example, produce a particular food ingredient. To this point, I've talked a lot about the need for members of various scientific disciplines to come together into multidisciplinary teams to tackle transdisciplinary problems. Engineers, biologists, chemists, physicists, computer scientists, and mathematicians, and indeed specialists in various subdisciplines of these, are all needed to solve complex problems like how to produce more food using less land and fewer resources. However, there are still many groups missing here. To this end, I want to come back to something I mentioned earlier, which is the concept of GELS. Now, GELS again stands for genomics and its ethical, environmental, economic, legal, and social aspects. The involvement of GELS-related research is fundamental to the mission of the Canadian Genome Enterprise, as we want to ensure that any innovations coming from our projects are positioned for success within our society. This forces researchers to think about the big picture surrounding their work before it's done, to identify any potential roadblocks to implementation before they arise. It also allows them to interact more closely with social scientists, economists, community leaders, regulators, and others to determine how their innovations will fare outside the walls of academia. This facilitates answering important questions about each project's goals, such as, is what we are doing ethical? Who could be impacted negatively? Are we being the best possible stewards for our planet? Are the innovations we support good for the economy as a whole, or the finances of a few? Does our research have legal or regulatory implications, and how should we best prepare to deal with them? And most importantly, who are we benefiting from our research? How are we contributing to a more just society? And how can we make sure that everyone benefits? We believe that this combination of introspection and soliciting ideas and information from a wide range of disciplines improves the impact of the projects supported by the Genome Enterprise. One important way in that we support genomics innovation and implementation is ensuring that the public has the information and resources it needs to make well-informed decisions. Which brings me to my final topic here today, education. Now, I don't know about you, but I didn't get a whole lot of information in school about the agriculture and food sector, nor about the potential careers within it. Honestly, I don't think I heard much about the connections between biological research and farming until I got to Ontario Genomics. How are students supposed to know about the preponderance of amazing, interesting careers available to them if they're never exposed to them? How are we going to create the transdisciplinary thinkers of tomorrow if we're not giving them the tools to think this way? Early in my time at Ontario Genomics, we decided to do something about this. Now, for some background, back in 2017, Ontario Genomics, with support from Genome Canada, teamed up with the Agricultural Adaptation Council to fund a selection of genomics research projects through the Ontario Regional Priorities Partnership Program, or RP3. This program stemmed from an in-depth strategy we had developed for the use of genomics in ag and food, based on hundreds of conversations we had with various stakeholders in the community. Now, like most genomics enterprise programs, these research projects were required to be partnerships between academic researchers and industry organizations, ensuring that they were of significant need and would involve collaborations among these groups. We ended up funding 8 projects that spanned a wide swath of the ag and food landscape in Ontario, including breeding more resilient dairy cattle and pigs, improving vaccines for the poultry industry, creating more robust winter wheat crops, and even building a database for brewing yeast genomes to support Ontario's craft brewing industry. As part of this program, funds were set aside to complete a community outreach initiative to be developed by Ontario Genomics, AAC, and the 8 funded projects. When we began to brainstorm how to ensure that this outreach initiative would be most impactful, we started by thinking about our target audience. Now, genomics is a complex topic that is normally begun to be taught in the 2nd or 3rd year of university, and really only in life sciences programs. We thought that by using real examples of genomics research happening in Ontario and tying these to common themes like climate change, food security, and animal welfare, we could make this topic more accessible to high school students and hopefully show them a bit more of what was possible as far as careers in science and the ag and food sector. The only problem was that we didn't know anything about getting resources into the hands of teachers and into classrooms. So this is where AgScape comes in. When we approached AgScape with our idea to build educational resources around genomics and agriculture, they were immediately on board and excited by the prospect. They assured us that we'd be able to create something impactful, rooted in the current Ontario curriculum, and that we'd be reaching more students than we had ever imagined. Every step of the way, we knew that the information we were trying to convey would be done so with care and with the students in mind. And perhaps most importantly, AgScape shared our commitment to not just throwing information out there to be memorized. Rather, they created a resource full of activities, multimedia, coding exercises, research projects, and thought-provoking questions to ensure that students had to fully engage with the information and think about how it affects their everyday lives. Now, since the release of the Genomics in Agriculture and Food resource, we've been delighted with the response. In the 3 months since its launch, our resource has already been distributed to at least 290 classrooms, representing over 5,500 students. And we've also heard some amazing feedback from teachers who are using it. One of these teachers even said that they had just had the best day of teaching that they'd had in a long time. It's impacts like these that make us not be able to wait to work with AgScape more. And we think perhaps that maybe students would be interested in learning more about maybe cellular agriculture, for example. Now, at the end of the day, my hope is that through resources like these, when a student sees this tomato in the produce section, they don't just think about the farm or greenhouse where it may have come from. I want them to think about the farmer, the agronomist, the genomicist, the field worker, the food scientist, the distributor, and everyone else whose hard work got that tomato where it is. And more importantly, I want them to think about how they themselves could contribute to making that tomato even better. I want to thank everyone at AgScape for the work that they do to make this a possibility. I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to indulge this hope today, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you. And I will stop sharing.
Awesome. I thought I'd get started by saying thank you, Mike, for such an amazing presentation. Two big things that really stood out to me was the importance of making authentic connections and collaborations across people and sectors so that we're able to understand the challenges across the sectors and better able to address those challenges. Because without being able to have conversations and be transparent and talk about all these items, how are we better able to feed all those people 11 billion by 2100?
Yeah.
And that's going to change that number. It's going to grow as like birth rates change, mortality rates change, and they originally said, I think it was 9 billion by 2050, and now that's higher than ever before.
Yeah.
And the other great item I thought that really stood out to me was the idea of transdisciplinary thinking. It's very synonymous in the education world where we talk about cross-curricular teaching, and the idea that, when we talk about science, we're not just talking about science, we're talking about geography, we're talking about communications, we're talking about everything within a giant package. And we use those skill sets to better equip students so that they're able to address all these problems. And that's what we focused on when we created that resource with you guys.
Yeah. I'll just say on that, Mercedes, it always amazes me when I look at the resource, so there's all these curriculum connections in there for people who don't know. And, I was like, okay, well, there'll be all the science curriculum. Well, no, there's science, there's geography, there's civics, there's history, there's all sorts of art, there's all sorts of things in there. And you're right, they all kind of converge in this cross-curricular or transdisciplinary way. And we love to see that.
Yeah. So as everybody's thinking about and pondering different questions, I encourage everyone to post them in the chat. I'm just going to read out some great comments that are being said. Mike, you're better off as a scientist than an orthodontist was the one that popped up. I think Kelly Daynard said that.
Thank you.
I think we can all agree with that. Not saying you wouldn't be a great orthodontist, but I think we value your role at Ontario Genomics.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Everybody's extending great thanks towards you if you're not seeing the chat. And that's a very interesting presentation that you shared and great examples. And I think what you did was really solidify and grounded it with great examples of what's going on in the industry and how it's changed so much and what we're doing to innovate. And kind of, I think maybe I'll start with a question potentially. I was wondering if you could tell us more about the ONRP3 projects and maybe go a little bit deeper, maybe into one, and maybe even, I'm not going to say your favorite one, but because we don't want others to know, but one that really stood out to you in terms of you really liked the goal and the direction and how it connected to animal welfare, food security, climate change, and those three major topics. They're kind
Sure.
of really popping up in social media in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, actually, I'll use this opportunity to plug another resource that we put together with the help of Farm and Food Care Ontario. So, thank you again, Kelly. But uh, we created this video resource to try to highlight these three topics that Mercedes just mentioned: climate change, food security, and animal welfare. And so go check those out on Farm and Food Care's website, because they're awesome. They did a great job putting them together. But there's one project in particular that touched all three of those themes. And that's a project that's led by Christine Bays at the University of Guelph, as well as CMEX. And that is a project where they're trying to develop and breed more resilient dairy cattle. So in our video resource, there's an amazing virtual reality enabled tour of the dairy barn at the Elora Research Station, which everybody should check out. But this project is really about looking to the future to see what is going to be necessary as far as how we breed our dairy cattle and what the needs of those cattle are going to be. And so how can we improve their welfare in making them perhaps more resilient to things like increased temperatures or humidity, and while also maintaining their milk production and the various traits that we're looking for from an economic standpoint. So that really hits kind of, the need to adapt to climate change, the need to maintain food security. Obviously, milk and other dairy products are incredibly important in our society and will continue to be so, while also maintaining and improving animal welfare as we go along. So I think that project really did, a great job of kind of unifying these three themes. And I hope everybody checks out those video resources, because they really are cool, and gives you kind of a little peek into that project as well as some other projects, including, of course, everybody loves the brewing yeast project, and kind of cataloging the natural genomic diversity in the brewing yeasts that we use today, as well as a project that we had in collaboration with Ferrero, where we're trying to figure out ways to grow hazelnuts in southern Ontario so that they don't have to be shipped all around the world. And again, kind of mitigating and adapting to climate change and the use of resources and things like that. So if you like Nutella or Ferrero Rocher, don't worry, we're working on that too.
That's awesome. And you brought up a couple great points, and I'll even mention that Kelly shared the link to those videos that you mentioned.
Awesome.
Dennis outed you to say that the yeast in the brewery was your favorite. So I'm glad you mentioned that one. And then what I really liked is you brought up these words, mitigating and adapting. And that is two important words that we focus on when we deliver our education programs as well, is the idea that, yes, there's a challenge in terms of climate change, and we're trying to adapt to the growing conditions in terms of really strong temperatures or really low temperatures, or very strong variables in terms of weather. And the idea that even though there's challenges, there's could be potential opportunities, and working within like genomics, we can actually work with that. Like, for example, you brought up hazelnuts, that we don't commonly grow them here. That's an opportunity in terms of new access to local crops and expanding what we're able to produce and creating our own local Nutella that everybody loves.
Absolutely, yeah, and we think about that a lot, right? It's not just adapting to climate change, but also trying to slow down or even reverse parts of climate change. We work with a lot of projects that for example, are trying to convert waste into valuable products through genomics and engineering biology, so that there's less methane being released in landfills, or again, breeding cattle that are more efficient at digesting their food, and so that they release less methane, which is an ozone depleting gas. So, there's lots of ways that we can apply what we know about life and about how life has grown over the past billion years, right? Like, there aren't many challenges that life or nature itself hasn't already had to solve. And so it's up to us to kind of extract that information and unlock it, so that we can better thrive on this planet, and improve our relationship with our environment while still sustaining those 11 billion people.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's very true. I have a couple of questions coming in. One,
Sure.
is there a great way to contact you for additional questions? And I would say most likely is email. If Mike
Yep.
has time, he'll populate it in there, or someone from the team will shoot it in there for you to contact. Thanks, Tara, for that question.
Yeah, and our email can be found on our website, ontariogenomics.ca, as well. So super easy to find us. And yeah, absolutely, reach out anytime with any questions, any thoughts. We're always open to that level of communication.
And then kind of building off of that is kind of a question for both of us, is that we all know science terminology can be very complex.
Yeah.
And you did a great job of explaining all the different terms. It gave me a toss back to high school science where I'm like, oh, maybe I should have paid attention a little bit more. But how did you go about in terms of viewing the simplification of that messaging to make it more accessible? And then kind of towards me, how we work together to make sure that happened.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll start by saying that AgScape and Mercedes, yourself and your team, were excellent resources and excellent kind of sounding boards for, it can be tough, right? As scientists, I've been steeped in this terminology for 20 years now, and so sometimes I forget what it's like to not have this kind of foundation of knowledge. So again, that communication among Ontario Genomics and AgScape, was invaluable for doing that. But then, there's also amazing resources all over the place to kind of, if when I'm having trouble explaining something, there's already resources out there that do a great job of explaining these little topics that I can kind of extract that and connect it to the other stuff that we're talking about. So again, not living in your own bubble, not living in your own head, not living, exclusively, not speaking exclusively with the people who have all of this knowledge, can be really helpful in trying to find new, fun and simpler ways of explaining these complex topics. And again, I think rooting everything in kind of the human experience, or with these grand themes that everyone's really familiar with, can be really helpful in creating that context and allowing you to kind of play within it, and how you describe these sometimes really advanced topics.
Yeah, that's a great response. And then to expand on it, I think there was just a lot of honesty between the our two teams, where we were honest by saying, I have no idea what you're talking about. Right? I'm just like, I'm not really sure what that word means. I'm not sure what that looks like. And then from there, we're like, okay, so let's start with that and then see how we can build off of that.
Yeah.
So looking at, different kinds of videos, imagery that represented that, so that we could extrapolate that base, and then scaffold it so that we were able to build upon it, so that students and teachers learned about it. Because if we didn't know, let's start with the teachers going to teach the lessons. They got to figure it out too first to be able to communicate it effectively with their class.
Absolutely.
And yeah, technology has presented an opportunity in many ways where we get access to a plethora of resources. So even when we were talking about, do we need to create a video? No, there's probably a video already existing on YouTube that we can access, or Vimeo, or diagrams or games or all of these items that we can consolidate and build it into a very successful lesson plan and resource overall.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say, that's another reason why it was so important that we, created this partnership and worked together on this, because, we were thinking about impact as far as how do we get into as many hands as possible, right? But there's impact within the resource itself in communicating our message and teaching this science that we wouldn't have been able to do without your help. So again, really appreciate what AgScape brought to the table and how easy it was to work with all of you, and that kind of honest communication, because that's so key to every endeavor that we're coming across now, but especially this for us.
Yeah, I can see that, especially with working with the agriculture and food industry or any industry. Honestly, it starts with an environmental scan and a question. Are we all experiencing this challenge? Where's the problem? Okay, now we know what the problem is. Let's come together and figure out what the answer to that problem is, or answers, because there can be more than one.
Absolutely.
So I guess I think we'll just leave it off with one last question, Mike.
Sure.
What else would you like to share about your experience in terms of working with the agriculture and food industry, and maybe how has it expanded your thinking around the future and the potential for a future for our students? Like, how do we build that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so it's a great question, and I'll say, again, I'm from a medical science background, I'm from an immunology background. I've always kind of applied these various concepts that I was talking about today to my own research, and not really thinking about how it could be applied, in different sectors. And so, since coming to Ontario Genomics, and especially working on this RP3 program and with various stakeholders in the ag and food sector, it's really opened my eyes and my mind to just what we're talking about, these cross-sectoral, cross-curricular, transdisciplinary kind of opportunities that we have. And I think, we're still seeing over and over that, there's these silos that we've built up, especially in academia, but also in industry, of, we work with our people to try to answer the question in our silo, in our pen, right? But if we just opened that up and understood a little bit more about the questions that other sectors, that other disciplines are asking, and applying the tools that we have together, we can accelerate our progress. And and I see that happening here in Ontario. I see it happening in Canada and around the world, and it just makes me that much more hopeful for how we can tackle these problems and how we can grow as a society and improve our standing on the planet here. So it's through resources like this. It's through these conversations and communication amongst all us that we're going to be able to really tackle these issues. And I'm just really thankful to be kind of exposed to this now, and hopefully be able to ensure that it doesn't take the next generation till their mid-30s to figure this all out, right? Let's get them thinking about it in their teens and before. So thank you again for having me. This was an amazing experience, and I hope that everybody had a good time and learned at least one thing.
Yeah, I guess pulling from the teaching experience, like, if someone learns one thing, a tear comes to your eye. I was almost crying during your presentation. I'm so emotional. But it's the educator in me coming out. But yeah, thanks, Mike, for such a great presentation. And just to say thank you, we're going to do a donation in your honor and Ontario Genomics honor to Second Harvest, as they're supporting our communities at this time for a need for food security. So yeah, I hope you stick around, because we got an educator panel coming up, and feel free to ask questions.
Sounds good. I can't wait.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
So thanks, everyone. Yes, we had such a great first keynote presentation. I'm excited to move on to our panel presentation, which I'll be moderating, and it's called Dynamic Approaches in Fostering Agriculture and Food Literate Citizens. And just to get started, I'll start with a little bit more of background about me. I have a master's of teaching from the University of Toronto and am one of 3 Ontario certified teachers on staff, Shauna McQuarrie being the other one, and Cassie Brunsfield being the other one as well. And we work very strongly with our team at AgScape to build passionate agriculture and food education programs to encourage more students and all students in Ontario to become food literate, including our teachers as well. So I'm excited to moderate this panel on the topic of, again, dynamic approaches in fostering agriculture and food literate citizens. During our conversation, I'll be asking our panel a bunch of different questions, and they're all different professionals from the educational sector with different backgrounds and ties to agriculture and different kinds of passions towards the agriculture and food industry. And then following the moderated questions, I'm going to open it up for a Q&A. So feel free to write any questions in the chat throughout the duration, and I'll keep them noted as I'm going through. And so as I'm reading the panelist names, they're going to be welcome to our screen. So I'm going to start with Nancy. So Nancy is one of our teacher ambassadors at AgScape, and she has played a key role in terms of launching our teacher ambassador program to be offered in French to all students in Ontario. She grew up on a dairy farm in rural Quebec, and she has had the opportunity to get involved with biotechnology, food transformation, and the environment in later years. As an educator, she has always enjoyed bringing project-based learning to science classrooms, and she's a science teacher. And so thank you again to Nancy, who's kind of helped my dreams life in making sure that we're reaching French communities across Ontario.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And then next we have Nigel Carlisle. He's a secondary teacher with Upper Canada District School Board in Eastern Ontario. He graduated from Lakehead University in 2018 with an honors degree in geography, and has brought aspects of environmental sustainability and stewardship into his classroom for the past 3.5 years. His classroom has a hydroponic grow tower and has traditional vegetable and herb gardens inside the school. So he plays a key role in making sure that students are learning more about agriculture and food in his classroom. And just say hi.
Oh, thank you for having me. Hello.
And then last we have Sarah Steeper. So Sarah is an elementary school teacher in Huron County. She's always keen to share her enthusiasm for agriculture with her students. Her family has an apple orchard near London, Ontario, and she is the school exhibit director at the Zurich Agricultural Society. And she, including Nigel, is actually on our teacher committee, the first ever that we ever have. So we're welcome to have her as well. Just jump in and say hi.
Oh yeah, hi, thank you so much. I'm excited for today.
So we're going to get started with our panel questions, and we'll give everybody an opportunity to answer each one of the questions. We'll be going through it. If you feel like, someone has already answered it in the best way, you can just say, hey, I agree with one of the other panelists, and we can keep on going. So one of our first questions is, what does building agriculture and food literacy in students mean to you? And why is it important for youth to become agriculture and food literate? So let's start with Sarah, because she's the first one I see on the screen.
Sure. So as an elementary school teacher, I think that's kind of the base of students' experience, like learning about agriculture. And especially now, like when I look back on my own childhood and schools, I think even now with all these resources and being able to access online, youth are presented and kind of introduced to agriculture more in the classroom. A big thing, it ties into like really all aspects of their life, like the school curriculum, health and healthy eating. We touch on agriculture there, geography, when we learn about like regions of Canada and what parts of Canada grow what types of food. I always like to highlight like where we live in southwestern Ontario for me, part of the St. Lawrence lowlands, a great soil, like one of the best places to grow food in our country. So just letting students know that, I think, is important. Yeah, and then just different career opportunities. I always say, like, as educators, we are kind of prepping our students for jobs that we don't even know exist yet. So thinking about the future, just thinking of all the different career opportunities in agriculture to come to. So really exciting for students.
Awesome, thank you. And so you brought up something that Mike brought up earlier, is that this idea of transdisciplinary thinking, making connections, bringing it all cross-curricular, tying all the subjects together. So thanks for bringing that great point. Let's go on to Nancy. How would you say is the importance of building agriculture and food literate citizens? Why is it important?
Well, you brought up earlier that my background, I was always immersed in knowing where food came from and how food was transformed and how waste was treated. So when I went into my graduate studies, I was in Montreal at McGill, and a lot of people did not, I was amazed by the fact that they didn't know what I knew, but at the same time, they were not exposed to it, right? And to me, having that knowledge from a very early age is bringing you skills of multiple facets, from being able to make food choices to enjoying actually growing your own, to being able to prepare meals with your family from a very young age. I mean, remember making pies and jams when I was in grade 2 or 3. These are things that students and children in general can grow from, that I think nowadays that as the population is growing and a lot more people live in cities, they just don't have that access to one of the resources. I mean, we had an orchard in the backyard, so we had all those things and we had to use them and put them somewhere, right? So that's why we did that. And now with multiple income families, there's less time, and sometimes food choices are guided by the choices that families' priorities. Most Canadians now are 2 generations away from that connection to the land. So I think that the schools now are probably the best place to bring that information back, and as early as possible, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think like it echoes Sarah's passion and being an elementary teacher. It's like, we gotta get started and talking about having these conversations, because we need to start young, bring back that connection. And my grandparents were farmers, and you're right, I'm a few generations away, and my connection with the land really started with working at AgScape. So I got brought back into it, even though they left for different reasons. But it's important to maintain that connection. Let's go on to Nigel. Same question.
All right. So I think it's a really good connection, and I resonate with Nancy, how I grew up in the country as well. So I grew up with the farms in the background, the orchard on the property, and using those resources. Now I work at an inner city school where most of the kids have never grown anything of their own, let alone a plant from Walmart at their own house. So bringing this agricultural literacy and showing them how they can easily grow food in their own homes is cool. I think also looking at where our food is coming from. So Sarah talked about that in hers, where that food is coming from, and knowing that the crops are available to them. It's a breakfast that you can grow, or that you can read the ingredients, understand the ingredients, is very different to the Monster energy drink that my high school students bring to their first period class for breakfast. Just that nutrition and understanding where food is coming from and what food actually is, not this created food. I think that's really important.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you kind of all touching on this, like our theme really, which is making authentic connections. And that's kind of why I want to expand a little bit more on this next question is, why is that important to make authentic connections between students and the agriculture and food industry, the sector? Like, have you seen a positive response in making those connections for them?
So I'll start because I finished, and I did. We did make really great connection. So I had students who never thought about growing things in my classroom, and I went and talked to them this morning. I was like, okay, give me some other things, like what else have you taken away? Because, get that refresh. And she's like, oh, I got to show you all these pictures of my garden I'm starting this year. And she showed me all of her plants that she's already started to grow for her first garden ever. And she's got like 27 plants that she's already planted and seeded, and she's getting ready to grow. And that connection from what we did in class to her own life, to growing her own food, is really impactful.
Yeah, awesome. That's a great example. And then going on to Nancy.
Unmute, there you go. I think I've seen my two boys are in grade 4 and 5 now, and we're in Newfoundland and Labrador. They've had the opportunity to do the little green thumb project when they were in grade 3. So basically, in their classroom were outfitted with growing gardens and lights, and they were growing their beans. And one lunch they would stay over, and they actually made their own pizza. They made the bread. They learned about how the yeast was fermenting, I suppose. And they actually used their basil, used their tomatoes. And after that, there was no stopping them. They would come home. Can we plant this thing? Where's my plant? I put it in a window, Mom. What is wrong with it? So, and that was a few years ago, right? So earlier on, that connection between them wanting to be part of growing things, or Mother's Day presents coming up, is very important. But it is also, these are skills that can transfer. Nigel was mentioning being in our city. These are skills that can definitely transfer to at-risk populations and help them in making better choices. But also as a overall learning concept, I feel like a lot of the problem solving, the basic fundamentals of life-saving basic skills are getting diluted by, I'll call CIA if I have a flat on my tire, or I'll, just those basic skills, like, how from very young age, how can I change this? My plant does not have enough water, it's going to wilt, therefore I need to water. Like, just that seeing things, finding solution by yourself, or like researching, my plant is yellowed, what can that be? The soil is such and such, and that certain, just overall life skills that are extremely important, that transfers to a lot of other topics.
I was just going to add, I really agreed with Nigel on and what he's doing in the classroom with teaching his students to understand that the food that they are eating can be grown and produced here in Ontario as well, is really neat. I think that's a really important idea. My other thing about authentic connection, it's unique to, I guess, my experience. I'm working in rural Ontario with not in big cities, kind of opposite as Nigel, but the students in my classrooms, their parents and their family members are involved in agriculture. And I think for them, they might think it's very normalized, and they don't realize the connection to the global aspect of that. I think even growing up myself in a rural setting on a farm, yes, I always knew we always grew apples on our farm, but now as I learn, I feel like I know more about the bigger impact of my family alone producing food for others, right? So I think being in a rural setting with students, I think learning about agriculture is really important for them as well, just because they might not even realize that that's not what everyone else is experiencing in the world. And it's a kind of a unique situation for their families. And just thinking, we watched a lot of farm tours in my classroom the last year, especially with COVID and online everything. Kind of them watching these videos and relating and we have that on my farm. I guess this is kind of a cool thing that other students are learning about in Canada. So it's definitely authentic in the sense that even students in rural Ontario, rural settings, they might not even understand their whole impact of agriculture around here. So it's very neat.
Oh, I love these ideas that you're bringing up. Is the idea of the importance of getting down to developing food literate competencies in students. I know where my food comes from. I know how to prep it. I know how to grow it. I know what's going on with it. so that they're better equipped to be successful adults. And you're right, some of that's being lost. Like students don't even know how to even look after their clothing and what the different laundry labels are. And that's like a component of how to look after your clothing. And that's tied to the agriculture and food industry. And we need to know these items. And I like what you're talking about is that no matter where you are, where a student is located, where you're located as a teacher, is that you play a role within the agriculture and food industry. Like there's a sense of empowerment. I know how to look after myself. I also know that this connects to a bigger global scale or a local scale. There's a contribution they're making. And that's kind of like what I want to talk about next is, I wonder if you could share more unique ways you have brought agriculture and food education into your classroom or taught it, since Nancy, you're a teacher ambassador as well, and highlight how the students have responded. Is it a positive response? Are they asking more questions? Do they want to learn more? Are they feeling that that they are better equipped now that they have this information? I'll start with Nancy.
Yeah, I didn't mention earlier the being slightly redundant, but the younger grades program. We also had the composting, so the students with the worm farm, so the student saw the full circle of nutrients being recycled and being reused in the garden. That had a huge impact. So one year they would do the compost and it would save their recess. And actually, because the worms would not be able to have processed food in the compost, and the kids all wanted to feed the worms every day at recess, they started bringing healthier recess snacks like fruits and vegetables, so that they could give their scraps to the worms, which then the following year was used into the garden. So that was a great transition for them to really become more sensitized to the cycle of real food. So that was one experiment that was great. And similar to Nigel, in the past in New Brunswick, I reopened the greenhouse. I had a very academically strong class. So every day we did project-based learning. Some of them did hydroponics. Some of them tested different soils. Some of them did really their own questions. And I think just that exposure made them more aware of what they could do and how they could problem solve, on top of learning a lot about growing their own food.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's a lot of work to have a greenhouse and maintain it.
And so clean it.
Yeah. Yeah. Nigel, do you want to talk more about different kinds of projects you've done with your students and how that's kind of fostered interest for agriculture and food?
For sure. So in the first week of my class every year, the kids all plant an herb garden of their own. And so just like you said, taking care of your laundry, that's something you do every week. My students had to take care of their herb garden every day for the whole term they're with me. So right from planting those seeds to transplanting them to a larger pot, to watering them, to measuring and calculating all those different things, like measuring the height of the plant, making sure it's getting enough sunlight. Does it need to go under the grow light? Does it need to move? Is it too close to the light? Making all those modifications for their individual plant. We don't have a lot of space on our school property. We're a city block, so outside has a soccer field with a track around it, and that's their entire outdoor space. So all of my stuff is contained within my classroom. So it's just plants that grow on the desk, which is awesome because then those kids can take those and grow them in their apartment building that they're living in. As long as they have a window or some sort of light source, they can grow that individual herb garden in their home. They understand they don't need this large property with garden beds and trees to grow their own food. We also purchased a hydroponic tower. A lot of schools now have them, and ours is located right in our front foyer. So whenever anyone comes in the building, they see it, it's there. And right now we're actually harvesting the lettuces off of it and making lunches for our breakfast program for those kids who can't afford to buy lunch, and an alternative to the hamburgers and poutine and pizza that's served in our cafeteria, right? There's that fresh salad and it's free. We're just giving it away so that they have that opportunity taste the food that they then grew in the classroom. Another really cool thing I've been doing in my classroom is using robotics. So that's a totally different side of agriculture education, looking at how agriculture is becoming more math focused and coding and robots and building. And we do a agriculture simulation in my classroom where kids build a robot and then have to code their robot to perform tasks on the farm, like moving cattle from one area to another or harvesting different things on the farm. And it really gets those kids engaged and understanding that agriculture isn't just growing food, it's also these other aspects. Really gets the kids interested who like the video games to understand that they could have a job in agriculture playing with robots.
I love that. I love how we're just connecting it to different things in terms of technology, bringing it back to the school community by being able to harvest the lettuce, contributing to the breakfast programs. There's definitely a sense of like empowerment, ownership, developing those skill sets, like you said, and then they can go on to different kinds of jobs and careers tied to agriculture and food. They can work in tech, they can work in terms of developing different kinds of softwares and engineering to support the community, and all work towards this idea of food security for the local and global world. I love that. Yeah, I love hearing about these projects. So going to Sarah,
Yeah.
same question.
Yeah, I love it too. I love listening to both of you and Nancy. I love the compost ideal and getting the worms. I'm like, I got to do that like next week. And I love Nigel's idea of like the hydroponics and growing food. I'm like, okay, we don't do that. And that would be very cool. So just learning from other educators, I love that. Anyway, so I have a couple of little examples. I taught kindergarten for quite a few years, and in the spring we get some incubate eggs and we incubator, and we watched baby chicks being born. So we'd have them for about a couple weeks in a little incubator in our classroom, and you always have to keep water in there. Then the students got to, like, we read stories about chicks. It was kind of like a experiential learning kind of idea. And the students got to watch, we would candle the eggs, which is like, putting a light under the eggs to see the growth in the eggs. And we would watch the chicks develop, they would hatch. And that was really cool. It was just a very hands-on little experience. And we had like the chicks for a couple of weeks after, before we sent them out to a farm after that. One of our families had one. I got to participate in the international plowing match. I think in Walton, it was in Walton in 2017, Walton, Ontario. So kind of organized my whole school to hop on buses and head there to experience it's a very big, large farm show basically, which was really cool. I'm also part of the Zurich Agricultural Society, and there's lots of societies all over Ontario running fairs and educational programs. And I'm the school exhibit director, but in the classroom, I get to kind of, so usually I develop different exhibits and things that classroom teachers can do with their students to prepare for the fair. And then the students' work is displayed at the fairs generally. So just kind of getting that connection between communities and classrooms and families and all that. Definitely been loving all of the virtual farm tours just throughout COVID and teaching. AgScape, they did a ton. Agriculture in the Classroom did a ton. They did a big Canada farm tour, and it was like 11 tours, came with a passport. The kids got to travel to each province. It was very engaging. The students seemed to love it. And right now I'm teaching grade 5, so they were very like, I don't know, I just felt like it was really great connections to see like live different aspects of farming, sugar beets, seed farm, beef farm, aquaculture, there was fish farms and everything. And I think the best part reflecting on it is not only like student learning, but I think of my colleagues who don't come from agriculture backgrounds and how much great learning all of those tours were. So just really happy that we were able to like turn our focus to technology and kind of bring students outside of their classrooms. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love what all of you are touching upon. You've looked at it 2 different lenses where, okay, there's opportunities to do experiential in person, and then there's opportunities to even do experiential virtually with the virtual food and farm field trips. And I think this is a great thing to talk about, how the agriculture and food communities coming together with the education community very, very well to bring about all these different opportunities with becoming a member at 4-H, going to your local agricultural society to go to your fair, going to experiencing these virtual field trips being ran by Farm and Food Care Ontario, AgScape, and Agriculture in the Classroom Canada. And it's just showing that we've kind of been unified in the sense that, okay, we see there's a need and we're all coming together and we all have great things to bring to the table and we're collaborating on those and making great connections. So I love all the things that you kind of mentioned, and it kind of brings into, we've seen all these positive things happening. Were there any kinds of challenges that you've experienced either recently or throughout the course of your career in terms of being able to deliver agriculture and food education? How'd you address them? I'll start with Sarah, you spoke last.
Sure. Yeah, there can be challenges. I don't always feel it's just in the classroom. I think it's in general, just the general population's agricultural literacy. I think a big thing is social media plays such a big part, and there's two great sides of social media. You can get great facts and you can also get a lot of myths and stuff. So I think the balancing between truth and knowing the facts, just big thing like terminology, knowing what non-GMO or GMO means, knowing what organic really means, knowing, in health classes, teaching about food packaging, and we do like media literacy about that. Just knowing like really what you're reading and kind of turning all that information around. I really loved one of the farm tours, the virtual farm tours. They really talked about all those. They talked about like free range versus free run chickens, and they talked about what a fungicide versus a herbicide versus a pesticide. Not just talking about, oh, sprays are so bad, but just giving the information like, okay, this is what its purpose is, and these are the terms that, as farmers or agricultures, that's what we use, and just breaking some of the myths out there about, all of those terminologies. Yeah, and then I guess the other challenge is I'm like really passionate about agriculture and like education, and I think just with colleagues, you want to like share all that with them, but some of them don't come from these backgrounds. So just the challenge of getting the resources that I would use in my classroom out to other teachers in other schools, other communities all over Ontario, I think would be a challenge. But basically what we're doing today and like our teacher program that we're working together with, like we're trying to help each other and, reach out and change those things. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you bring up a great point. And I think about how, I think I was on a teacher conference, and then I said, oh, here's all these great resources to the teachers. And they're like, oh, I teach science. I don't teach about that. I'm like, yes, you do. If you teach science, you teach about this. You should try it. Take a step into new waters, and you'll be surprised what you can learn and how it can change your life, because I know it's changed mine.
Definitely. I was like, there was one example too. We watched, it was like a beef farm, and they were making like TMR mixes in a big bin. So they were like putting, corn and different things. And then later I was teaching about fractions or percents. We were doing percentages. And I was like, okay, think about the rations, like how much corn, what's percentage? It was just kind of cool to bring it back full circle, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And it shows how great of a teacher you are, Sarah, and everybody on this call is how we bring it back to what we have to teach in the classroom. Going to Nancy, what challenges have you experienced in terms of agriculture and food education, delivering it over the course of your career or the past year?
Well, I will have to agree with Sarah on many points that she brought up. And also, not to be redundant, but the previous presenter, Mike, was talking about how a lot of people become literate about food and agriculture in their 30s, and the hope is actually to bring that much earlier. So I think I love the new grade 4 to 6 exposition, the agriculture in Canada, and showing students all the things that we can grow, and things that surprise them. And did you know this? And do you know, like, can we grow mangoes here? Like, so, are mangoes good for the environment? And all those things to trigger their little minds to think about, oh, So maybe I should save having strawberries for when they're actually from here and they're actually tasting like strawberries. Just like giving them those little pointers or um, those thoughts about how things are going early on is, I think, is going to be a big savior in what we're doing.
Yeah. And to expand on that, so Nancy was speaking to that. We just expanded our teacher ambassador program to as early as grade 4. And we're continuing to add new lessons to those age brackets because we're hearing the need. We need to start talking about having these conversations as early as possible, even having little conversations about, oh, did you know this was a job? This is a job. You could be an agronomist. This is what agronomist is at that age bracket, to help them start thinking about what they could do potentially when they're older. So yeah, definitely key points is sometimes it's better to start getting them younger to help them know about the opportunities and re-solidify the opportunities as they age. Going to Nigel, what challenges have you experienced?
So I resonated with Sarah and the challenges of the teachers buying on into the agriculture and not understanding the connection. And as she said, like, wait a second, I have the game board that I got from AgScape, so we'll show it there. But to connect it to the careers class, right? To show them that there's all these careers in AgScape or agriculture that you don't understand. But another really big challenge I have is location. So being in a city school, not a big city school like downtown Toronto, but still a city school. It's a city school for our board. My classroom is usually in the second floor in an old science lab. So when you're thinking about agriculture, you don't think of doing it on the second floor in a school in an old science lab where you can't move desks and things. You're stuck to the how it's ordered, and the school where the property is. This answers, I know Christine had a question in the chat there about can the schools have gardens. Another one of my local high schools, which I collaborate with the teacher there, they have a full apple orchard and fruit orchard on property that they've planted for their students. So there's trees on the school property that just grow fruit and they harvest them. They have outdoor gardens. We can't do that at my school facility. And when I do get a classroom, I'm sharing it. So I can't, like, Sarah probably has her own classroom in an elementary world or shares with maybe a prep coverage teacher, but I share with 3 other teachers. So my stuff has to be contained to a sense that I can share with other people. So that's really a big issue. And proximity to other things. Again, being in the city, I can't just look out the back window and see a farm where some of my colleagues at country schools can do that. So location is my biggest challenge right now.
Yeah, and yeah, that's definitely you're all bringing up the similar challenges we've even seen. Is that there's kind of a hesitancy of other teachers to have these conversations with these students and bring that into their daily teaching around agriculture and food. Some of it's just that they don't have knowledge about it, so they don't want to step into the waters, afraid to kind of misrepresent any information. But you also bring up the point of we're working all together, and the thought of teaching with other teachers to actually expand the learning, because there is limitations at schools. And it's how do we work with other teachers to all cohesively work together and maximize the teaching so that we're able to provide unique experiences to students. And Christine actually populated in the chat that at their school, they weren't allowed to grow fruit-bearing trees because of risk management reasons. And that's happening in school boards across Ontario. Every school board has a different kind of bylaws that they have to follow, or different kind of policies they have in place where they're saying, no, we can't send students to farms to do co-ops because it's too much of a risk, or we can't grow these trees on the property because it could bring insects and then something can happen to the students. So it's coming together and figuring out how we can address them and work within these limitations can be very challenging, all this red tape that's happening. So kind of to that, it's just working with your administrator, it's working with your colleagues, and it's just trying to get everybody on the same page. Like, this is an important conversation and it's not going to happen in a day, but it's through advocates like yourselves that it happens slowly. So we thank you for that passion. kind of going on to the next question, something that we're focusing on the education sector and even at AgScape is how might diversity and inclusion be important to agriculture and food education? And that could be speaking to maybe a challenge in itself is that some students don't see themselves in the industry. I'll start with Nancy.
I am really looking forward to seeing that that new 4 to 6 lesson that I think is coming in the fall.
September.
Right?
Yeah. Yep.
Looking forward to see that. Yeah, I think that nowadays, I mean, it is a very hot topic of reconciliation and respect and acknowledgement in that we need to convey the same in agriculture. I mean, Southern Ontario was a huge farming land well before the settlers came in, and that knowledge might not be shared. That a lot of Indigenous people lost their land to make place for other types of farming and or were resettled in other areas. But in terms of inclusion too, I had great experience just out of nowhere. I was doing a virtual lesson with a virtual class actually. So all the students were on screen from different areas, and they all started talking about all their cultural food and how grandma makes this and I make this and I'm vegetarian on Wednesday, and then the teacher's like, oh, I'm vegetarian on Wednesday as well, and that kind of thing that those students who normally, I mean, they don't live together, they don't interact together at recess, right? They just go online and they're muted most of the time. But seeing them come together and get excited about sharing their family culture and all the different dishes that they make, and sometimes they didn't know the name in English or in French, and they explained to us what they were. It was really, really rewarding, and I think that inclusion also transpires in one of the lessons that we have on Canadian Food Guide. It has a game where that we usually don't have time to play it during the lesson, but we send it to the teacher to expand afterwards if they do have time. And it actually covers food security, where students have a certain budget and they need to follow Canadian Food Guide. But they can also go to different countries and see what the different food guides are and different plates are. So they can really expand on including other people in their class or in their neighborhood into their like food ways of thinking.
Yeah, awesome. And I love that you're kind of bridging this idea that food is synonymous with community and culture and coming together. And that's what is at the core of many of the conversations that we have, is that everybody has something to say about food because we all eat it. So we can have really great conversations about it. Let's go on to Nigel.
So with Nancy, that reconciliation piece is important, and it's something that I have to be very careful with and very focused on in my school. 25% of our school population is Indigenous. They're actually bused in from the reserve. We're the high school that serves the local community. So bringing those pieces of information into our classroom and their teachings and getting them to teach the class so we know it's authentic and coming from them is really important to me. So how the traditional medicine and how the traditional food that they use in agriculture in their communities, that's really important for me to making sure that we're inclusive and including their culture in our classroom. The white population, the Caucasian population is the minority in our school building. So just learning about all the different cultures and how they deal with food and what recipes they use and things we can grow that we might not think of as a white person or a Caucasian person is really big for inclusion and diversity in our classrooms.
Awesome. And yes, yeah, it's definitely important to have those conversations because yes, there's different methods to grow food, and we need to acknowledge that there's different ways, there's different learnings, there's different areas of knowledge and expertise, and bringing those students into the conversation, letting them lead those conversations gives them a sense of empowerment, a sense of where they feel they fit in to the agriculture and food sector, into the classroom, into education, that will better help them prepare or feel comfortable with moving forward and deciding, oh, maybe a career in the agriculture and food sector is for me, because I was able to have these conversations and I was able to empower and take control of them in the classroom. So that's some great points that you bring up, Nigel. Going on to Sarah.
Yeah, so my perspective is not only just in the classroom, just with being involved in agricultural societies, I think it's a bigger topic than just in our classrooms. I know, like I'm near Huron County area, a big agricultural area, rural Ontario. Definitely seen so much growth over the last few years. All like usually it would be like London is a big city, and Kitchener would be a big city, and like just the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, they put out a statement, I think last year, saying like 175 acres of farmland in Ontario are being sold daily to residential areas. So it is like, it's a fact that, you know, there's less farms, less farmland, and more houses and more residential areas. So even though the rural life here is definitely always been different than the cities, I'm noticing it now, right? There's so much more diversity and growth in all of these small communities. So myself and other people on other agricultural societies notice these things. And I was lucky to go to a convention this year. And this was one of the topics, just how do we get people that are new to our communities involved in things like our agricultural societies, or just educating them on like where food comes from, like how can we reach out and help everyone be accepting of change, and like and even for us, being open for change and being willing to like learn new things and experiences, I think is really, you know, you got to change your mindset and other people do that.
Yeah, and you're all bringing up great points. That it's not just it's not just we're doing this by ourselves. We're working within the agriculture and food community to show how different students can feel included. It's really focused on that diversity and inclusion piece. We all fit within this realm of food security, climate change. We all fit within this world. Kind of going on to the last question I have for you before I turn to questions in the chat, and feel free to anybody populate any of them. I've noticed a few that I will return back to just after this last question is, many of you have been involved with AgScape in different ways, as teacher, using the teacher ambassador program, delivering the teacher ambassador program. Sarah has used the virtual food and farm field trips, resources, everything that we offer. What do you see or hope to see for the future for agriculture and food education? What would you aspire for us to kind of collectively work together to make happen? I'll start with Sarah.
Yeah, it's hard. Like I was always trying to think, okay, what else can we do? But I'm excited to know that like food and agriculture literacy will be like included in curriculum one day, right? Like I'm excited that it's actually being recognized and like treated as important enough to be taught in Ontario, which I love. A big thing, just teachers having easier access to these materials and resources. I feel like I have easy access because I'm aware of it and I'm seeking it, but I always just hope, I hope other teachers are seeing these things. So I can share to who I know, but I always hope that it just keeps going. Definitely, like as an educator, anything that's a free resource is awesome. I think sometimes it's often hard, like maybe for your hydroponics thing, Nigel, or maybe the composter. I think in teachers' heads, they sometimes think, okay, how am I going to fund this? Or how do I make this in my classroom if it's not approved or, you know, funded by your school community or whatever? So I think finding ways to, you know, make those materials accessible. I love hands-on experiences, experiential learning, like getting out into the community. And I know it's a little easier for me. We did like a trip to Huron Tractor, which is like they sell farm equipment. We've done like going to little farms, but I know that's not accessible to everybody. So it's hard to find that connection, but it would be really cool just for more hands-on experiences. Like when I had the chicks in my classroom, wonder if that could be a program funded, or I know we did more of like a wildlife thing, but butterflies in the classroom. Do you know what I mean? Like more hands-on experiences. I love the composter idea with worms. I think that would be really cool. Yeah, just the better understanding of where food comes from. Food waste is a really big thing. You know, using what you need and what you can eat up and not buying extra packaging, consumerism, shopping local, all those things, just getting the connection to students, I think. Yeah.
Awesome. And then Nancy, do you have anything to add to that?
Just briefly, I definitely agree with Sarah. If when programs can be funded to have hands-on activity for early grades and just open their little minds to what it actually is, and in later grades they will remember having their hands in the dirt and feeding the children will remember that, right? They will already have made that connection. And yeah, and then another thing for the ambassador program is to have those 4 to 6 lessons, where I think we have 2 lessons now, but there are many of the open grade lessons that can be transferred or adapted, like agriculture in Canada, for example, could be downsized and like have a bit more. This is what we grow here. Look, maple syrup, cranberries, all those things that we're special in those things. So looking forward to see the expansion of that program.
Yeah, awesome. And then to Nigel.
I think back to Sarah, the hands-on experiences. I know when I first I met Mercedes at an Octi conference many years ago. I attended her session on AgScape, and my first question was, "Is it available in my area?" And in Eastern Ontario, it wasn't. And I was really disheartened. I was like, "Oh, it's not available here." But it's a good thing that COVID happened in a way, because I was able to engage more with AgScape and bring them to the classroom, because everything went virtual. At the time, everything was all hands-on. It was awesome, but then we went to virtual, and I was able to then bring them into our schools, because there's no one in our area that offered the programming in person. So just the expansion of your in-person, if that's a route we're going back to with COVID, hopefully nearing its end, the expansion of the in-person activities, because we love those hands-on activities in our classrooms for sure.
Yeah, and 100%, you all bring up great points around the importance of hands-on, experiential, be able to reach all geographic areas in Ontario. And that's something we are advocating for and focusing on for the next direction of AgScape, is that every classroom in Ontario deserves an agriculture and food education experience. And that is our focus, is to making sure that our programming is available to make that happen, whether it's a combination of virtual, in-person, professional development for teachers. It's going to be available across Ontario, and maximizing our programming so that French students, French classrooms, core French, French school boards can access our resources as well. So I just want to say thank you for answering all of those questions and bringing your insights about delivering agriculture and food education in classrooms in Ontario and across Canada, because we all work together cohesively to make that happen. I'm going to pull a couple of questions from the chat, and one of them is actually directed to more towards me, is how do we make sure that learning materials are get into the classroom? What grades we target? We target all grades from kindergarten to grade 12. Nancy, who delivers the Teacher Ambassador program, delivers, that's a core focus for grade 4 to 12, and we're continuing to expand it to make sure that more students get an agriculture and food education experience. But we have resources, we have virtual field trips that we offer for all grades. We have our Think Ag career competitions, which is where we bring in industry to run different interactive stations. And that's for grade 5 to 12. And we run all of our programming to make sure that every student at any grade can have an agriculture and food education experience. And then we support teachers with professional development opportunities so that they feel they can have the conversations that they need to have with students. And then kind of a couple questions coming in is, well, this is from Mike. Mike said, one thing we hoped for when developing our resource was that students would be a good way to spread the information by bringing home. Do you think that this is a good way of educating, not just the students, but their families as well? And I'll just leave it open. Sarah, you came off mute first, so go ahead.
Sure. Like one thing I was thinking of was that I know it was the Agriculture in the Classroom Canada program, but they made a package. It was like a paper package. And so over the 11 tours, it was about like a month long that we did this. Then we sent home the package. And I had some of the kids say like, oh, like my like they had talked about these things with their parents. So I thought it was kind of cool that we had the package the parents could like peek through as well. So I don't know, something very small, but
Yeah,
yeah.
but anything small makes a difference. It sparks an interest to learn more, right? Nigel?
I think that's one of the reasons why I do the little grow your own herb garden in that little 4-inch pot, because the kid can take that 4-inch pot home and put it on the counter at home, and they can use that food and bring that learning back home to spread the learning, like you said, so that the parents are also learning, oh, well, yeah, we can do this. And hopefully the kids will be so engaged, they're asking the parents to do it. They're asking the parents, can we go out and buy flowers? Can we go out and buy plants? Can we grow a garden? Just to spread that. And then they're going to show their friends and their family. It's continuously going to grow and grow and grow.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And then Nancy?
Yeah, and I've also seen it actually through the ambassador lessons. One of the parents mentioned that her daughter came back home so excited and saying how her classroom has never been so excited about agriculture, because the lessons were delivering topics that the students got engaged and excited about. So they just brought it home at supper table, and it came back to their parents that way. So if we continue to deliver information that's engaging and exciting for the students, then it definitely will be going home.
Yeah.
I just had one more I thought of this example while you guys were speaking, but coming from kindergarten, kindergarten was very hands-on learning, experiential based. Most of our documentation happens through photographs and videos. So we take a lot of photos and videos and we send them home to parents. And we used to have an app, we could send it directly. Sometimes we'd email the images. And I think it's very unique to kindergarten, but I think all classes can do that. But just little simple videos and pictures is like, oh, this is actually happening in my students' classroom. So yeah.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I've definitely even seen it during the virtual food and farm field trips, where we get even remarks from parents being like, oh, I watched this with my child and it was so fascinating. Like they were really excited. I learned something new. So the fact that we're expanding all these different opportunities, we're hitting students to make sure they're getting their experience, teachers who are learning from the virtual field trips at the same time their students are, and learning from the teacher ambassador program. They have the business of food, professional development courses they can take, think ag career competitions. It seems that through this avenue, through this multi-tier pronged approach, students, teachers, parents, everybody is getting a unique experience that helps them to understand more about our local food system, how we contribute on a global level, and what role they can play, even just starting a garden with their child. So I would say we're at the point of kind of bringing our panel to a close. So I want to start by thanking each one of you for taking time out of your days to join us. I know all of you are busy and doing different things. Sarah and Nigel, you'll be teaching today, and you took time off to make this happen. So thank you for doing that. And then Nancy, she set aside her teacher ambassador program lessons to join us today. So thank you for that. And through our thanks, we're going to be making a donation to Second Harvest, which focuses on providing food to communities in need. So thank you for, again, joining us. And with that, I'm going to actually begin by kind of concluding the event for today. And I want to, again, extend a huge thank you to Mike Dorrington from Ontario Genomics, and again, our educator panelists for providing us their time and insights today. And then I will pass it over to Catherine to kind of bring it to a close.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mercedes. Thank you, Sarah, Nancy, and Nigel. And really thank you, Mercedes, for moderating today. You did a great job. It was wonderful to hear everyone's thoughts and experiences. As a mother of 4, all of whom have friends that have no primary agriculture connection, when you give them the opportunity for that authentic connection, you can see it in their eyes. I know that that's not only the youth, but their parents. When you take the time to have that firsthand experience that we were talking about today and learn about where, why, and how they have access to safe and quality food in Canada. It really does make a strong impact. So you're right, Mercedes, we are working together with AgScape to make sure that people are feeling included and that they can ask the questions and be curious about agriculture and food. So great work. With that being said, we just wanted to say thank you again to the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, or OFA, for sponsoring today's panel and for helping us to continue to have collaborative conversations. And also, thank you to P&H Milling Group for allowing us to make this virtual event happen by sponsoring our broadcast. Thank you. As well, all of you who joined us today to support AgScape, we are grateful for each and every one of you and hope that you can join us at the remainder of our AGM, our 2022 annual general meeting. Our next session is a virtual session, and it is the AGM business meeting taking place on May 11th, so next Wednesday. Then please make sure that you join us for our in-person networking event on May 13th at the University of Guelph Arboretum. In the meantime, please stay safe, and we hope to see you all again soon. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and the AgScape team says thank you as well.